What's good, TMG fam? It's your boy L, and I'm back with another reaction. How y'all feel? Welcome back to the channel. Salute. Listen, man, I'm back with another little bit of a history lesson for myself, man. I'm about to get into the tragic real life story of Slipknot. Now, I've heard their story was crazy, but I've never really went in depth to learn about it. So today I'm here before you guys to actually sit and learn, man. I don't just want to hear, I want to learn about these bands and artists and different things like that. So, man, I think this is super dope to check out. All right, we're going to check out that as well as the bands that were plagued by tragic accidents on tour. So, man, I think this is a pretty dope lineup, man. If you're new to the channel, subscribe and join me as I learn about Slipknot.
Slipknot's history is full of dark turns, and almost everyone in the group has a tragic tale to tell. Let's take a look at the many awful incidents that have shocked a band that's usually more accustomed to doing the shocking themselves. This is the tragic real-life story of Slipknot. Many members of Slipknot have had rough patches in their lives, but few started as early as vocalist Corey Taylor. According to Blabbermouth, Taylor spent part of his teenage years living in a trailer park near Waterloo, Iowa, where, according to Taylor, the activities were somewhat limited. The singer reportedly described the place by saying, "At a place like that, there's only two things to do really. You take drugs and you f***." As a result, the young Taylor developed a dangerous taste for narcotics. As a teenager, Taylor reportedly said he once woke up in a trash can 12 miles from his home, with no shirt, no shoes, and blood on his face.
Damn! In a trash can, bro? What type of night did you have to wake up in a trash can, bro? Like what type of eventful night did you have to wake up in a trash can 12 miles from your home with blood on you? Like, you cannot begin to explain that in one setting, bro. That's crazy.
While his memory of the events was spotty, he figured he must have been at a party and overdosed. And instead of taking him to a hospital, his friends merely dumped him in a trash can somewhere under—
Not your friends, by the way, if they dumped you in a trash can. Just want to make that clear.
The assumption that he was dead. Terrifying as the experience must have been, this particular dark cloud ultimately had a silver lining. During his long walk back home, young Taylor decided that he had to get out of that place. Suffice to say, he followed through. Slipknot's 2001 sophomore album, Iowa, is as brutal as they come. According to Revolver, at least part of the album's sound may very well stem from the fact that its recording was an absolute horror show. The band was in a rather dark place thanks to the sudden and unexpected fame their first album had brought them, and the copious amounts of sex and drugs that tend to come with rock stardom had hollowed them out and left them depressed. Producer Ross Robinson broke his back during the recording and was confined to a wheelchair.
And see, we hear it time and time again. Time and time again, man. When we sit on the outside looking in, we're envious of their lifestyles, and we want to be where they are and live the rocker lifestyle, but we only see a small glimpse of what that may be. You know what I'm saying? They're depressed as well, bro. It just ain't all the fun that we think it is. You know, and hearing these stories, I think is good because that'll constantly remind us, man, that it's several different layers to this, not just the glamorous side that you think you see. You know what I mean? For real.
Singer Corey Taylor had personal issues and a drinking problem, and reportedly resorted to cutting himself with broken glass during recordings just so he could feel something. Both guitar player Jim Root and DJ Sid Wilson had nasty breakdowns, with the latter's eerie sound booth freakout becoming the album's haunting intro 515. After the album was done, things didn't get much easier. The worn-out band now had to deal with a record company that had expected a chart-friendly follow-up to their hit record, and not the absurdly angry Iowa album they got instead. Even the album's touring and promotion cycle brought little reprieve. Iowa came out a week before 9/11, and the band's aggressive music was banned from many radio stations in the aftermath of the terror attack. Slipknot percussionist Sean "Clown" Crahan likes his stage antics with a healthy dose of G.G. Allin. According to Louder, Crahan had a tendency to go in the zone during live shows and behave so dangerously that he said his wife would later tell him, "You're pushing it too far. If you die, you're just going to be some guy in a book somewhere." For a while, Crahan was actually quite intrigued at the prospect of winning the Darwin Award in the category of heavy metal performances.
I like making records, I like making videos, I like living in LA, I like traveling, but it's all about playing live.
However, one particular incident taught him to avoid turning his inner clown up to 11. One of his early go-to stunts was jumping headfirst into a garbage can, then falling over and kicking people in the legs while using the can to protect himself. Unfortunately, one particular time at Ozfest, the barrel he dived into was partially filled with water and he got stuck. For roughly 35 seconds, Crahan's head was submerged and he was certain that he was going to die. The watery death trap was ultimately pushed over and the clown lived to rock another day. But the terrifying experience taught him to rein in his performances, at least a little bit. But despite that close call, he says he still...
So not only was my man diving into trash cans, but he was diving into them without even checking them first to even see what was in them. It could have been... he found out one of them had water in it, but it could have been needles. Like, just diving in a trash can without looking is insane.
Still welcomes a healthy dose of personal pain during performances. Today, Slipknot have been around long enough that people know what to expect of them, but in 2003, they were still relatively new kids on the block. Their most recent album was The Brutal Iowa, and it was easy to see them as unpredictable and shocking because, well, they were. Maybe that's why the police linked the band to a horrifying killing committed by two metal fans from San Bernardino, California in spring 2003. To be fair, 20-year-old Jason Lamar Harris and 16-year-old Amber Rose Riley specifically stated that they were listening to Slipknot both before and after the deed. Reportedly, the duo was particularly invested in the band's song Disaster Piece, which does feature some rather gruesome lyrics, so maybe it's understandable that the cops raised an eyebrow. Of course, it soon transpired that the duo had been planning the heinous act for months and had already made one unsuccessful attempt to do it. Regardless of the two's taste in music, they were both tried as adults and sentenced to prison for their crime. Slipknot, of course, was never charged. In August 2008, Slipknot was going through a rough patch. The band had been forced to cancel several shows because drummer Joey Jordison broke his ankle, but something even worse related to the band loomed in South Africa. In the city of Krugersdorp, an 18-year-old student rampaged through Nick Dietrich Technical High School, waving a sword and slashing at people while dressed in a mask and costume that resembled Jordison's stage outfit. The student killed one person and injured another two, and people soon started pointing fingers at the band, alleging once again that they had somehow inspired the act. The director of a local student support network told the media, "He came here camouflaged as the guy from Slipknot. We know the wrong kind of music and drugs."
See, all that type of stuff can kind of play into, you know what I mean, your psyche in the band. Like, you start second guessing things. Now it doesn't feel like it's organic because you're thinking way too much about the content that you're creating. You know what I'm saying? You're thinking too much about your art because people are now claiming that it's influencing murders and different things like that. So, bro, that type of stuff can weigh in on a band, bro. Seriously, like, dang. I had no idea. No idea. And then you wonder why so much pain come out in people's music.
Drugs have bad effects. Young people need to be informed of the effects of bad satanic music. Slipknot initially...
And don't forget, their music was being banned from radio stations and different venues and stuff like that.
He declined to comment on the incident, but singer Corey Taylor eventually expressed his shock. He also pointed out that the band and its music can hardly be blamed for the actions of a disturbed person. Fortunately, South African authorities agreed, with the head of the police's investigative psychology unit saying, "People jump to conclusions and always God or Satan told the killers to do it. These notions shouldn't be taken seriously because it is straightforward. Someone of their own free will can kill another person." Bassist and songwriter Paul Gray was also Slipknot's surprisingly warm heart, a pleasant man who remained friendly and down to earth despite his success. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to last. Like countless others, Gray battled with drug addiction. By the time Slipknot was preparing their third album in 2003, he was so dependent on heroin that the rest of the band actually staged an intervention. Gray was temporarily able to kick his drug habit with his future wife, Brenna. Though he seemed to be the sober pillar of strength and calm amidst his significantly more chaotic bandmates, he unexpectedly succumbed to an accidental overdose of fentanyl, morphine, and Xanax in 2010. It was later revealed that he had shown signs of significant heart disease. He was only 38, and Brenna was pregnant with their child. The bassist's shocking death shook Slipknot to the core, and they held a tearful video press conference to address the tragedy. Brenna stood with the band at first, but soon started blaming them for not helping Gray. Gray's doctor, David Baldy, who prescribed him Xanax despite his addiction, was eventually taken to court for 10 counts of manslaughter. He was acquitted of the charges in 2018. You'd think that Slipknot's hulking guitar...
damn, how are they still functioning? That's a lot, bro. That's enough to cripple you right there to deal with that. Loss of a band member, already dealing with your own personal drug addictions and different things like that. People saying your music has influenced others to kill people. Like, and they continued on, man. So salute them for that, bro, because that's a lot of heavy weight on your shoulders.
Guitarist Mick Thompson would have little to fear in a physical confrontation, but in 2015, he was in a fight so bad that he left in an ambulance. The person who put Thompson in the hospital? That was his own brother Andrew, and the Slipknot band member very much returned the favor. Reportedly, the Thompson brothers had been enjoying a few drinks in a house in Clive, Iowa when they started fighting. The inebriated battle progressed to the building's front yard, and at some point, knives entered the equation. Both men suffered non-lethal stab wounds, even though Mick took one to the back of his head. It probably makes for awkward Thanksgivings, but on the plus side, the incident surely helped Thompson's heavy metal credentials. Neither Andrew nor Mick wanted to press charges in the aftermath, but Clive police did charge them both with disorderly conduct by fighting. Sadly, at least 3 people have reportedly died at Slipknot's live shows over the years.
Yo, I said that, I swear. Oh, man, I told y'all, bro, looking at some of those events, when they be like, one of them, I saw one of the concerts, he had everybody kneel down and then everybody just jumped up at once. And then you seen the circles and the big back and forth and people pushing and colliding with each other and throwing and just going crazy. I was like, yo, I don't know how nobody gets killed at none of these events. That is crazy. If you haven't seen it, man, check out one of their live events on YouTube, bro. It's insane when you look at it.
A 21-year-old student from Michigan was reported to have died after going into cardiac arrest while attending a Slipknot concert in 2005. In 2009, it was reported that a 29-year-old concertgoer suddenly collapsed at another show, also from a fatal cardiac arrest. The most recent incident happened in 2019 when a 62-year-old fan was enjoying a mosh pit at Slipknot's Knotfest concert in Tinley Park, Illinois, but reportedly took a hit and collapsed outside the pit. The fallen fan started having a seizure and was left unable to receive immediate medical attention. He ultimately passed away. Tragically, this happened mere weeks after the band had defused a potentially dangerous situation during another show in San Bernardino, California. In that incident, singer Corey Taylor abruptly stopped the concert to allow medical staff to reach and treat injured fans. Slipknot's first major lineup change since the death of Paul Gray came in December 2013 when the band ousted their longtime drummer Joey Jordison. The whole situation was rather mysterious, as singer Corey Taylor said that the decision had been extremely painful, telling Living Out Loud LA, "When we parted with Joe, it was honestly because of necessity. Starting to move on without him was one of the most difficult things we've ever done, just as hard in a lot of ways as trying to move on without Paul." The truth didn't emerge until 2016, when Jordison revealed at Metal Hammer's Golden Gods Award ceremony that his departure was prompted by a medical condition. Jordison suffers from a form of multiple sclerosis called transverse myelitis, and this nasty nerve disease rendered him unable to play his instrument for months. He eventually managed to push back the disease and regain his drumming ability, but describes the experience as something he, quote, wouldn't wish on his worst enemy. He also added that he has absolutely zero ill will toward his former band over his departure. Sometimes the greatest tragedies in life happen not to you, but to your loved ones. Slipknot percussionist Sean Crahan experienced the most devastating thing that could happen to a father in 2019 when his youngest daughter, 22-year-old Gabrielle, unexpectedly died. According to TMZ, the cause of death was accidental drug overdose. Although she reportedly did have a history of drug use, she had posted a sobriety coin on Instagram just days before the incident, indicating that she was 5 months sober. While undoubtedly devastated, Crahan handled this ultimate tragedy with the kind of poise and grace one wouldn't necessarily expect from a man who wears a clown mask and wreaks havoc for a living. In an elegant Facebook message to the band's fans, he thanked everyone for their support, apologized for not being able to personally reply to everyone who had reached out, and expressed gratitude for those who did. In 2019, another storm tore through the Slipknot camp. The group's percussion...
Sheesh, if everything we've heard so far wasn't enough, it's more. Like, the ultimate one out of all of them, though, is losing your daughter, bro. Losing your kid. That's tough. Losing your kid to drug, just losing your kid, period. It don't matter what the cause was. Having to bury your child is no experience that you want to ever, ever experienced at all. At all. Like, I know for a fact he's still dealing with that. Still dealing with that and trying to push through each and every day. This group has had some hurdles to overcome.
Percussionist Chris Fenn, known for his long-nosed mask, sued the rest of the group, claiming that Slipknot's business structure had gotten so confusing that other band members and their business manager were essentially stealing money. Fenn demanded forensic accounting to see precisely how much money he was owed. The rest of the band was less than delighted by the percussionist's actions and promptly kicked him out of the group. The band then issued a public statement that made no bones about their feelings, saying mysteriously, Chris knows why he is no longer a part of Slipknot. We are disappointed that he chose to point fingers and manufacture claims rather than doing what was necessary to continue to be a part of Slipknot. We would have preferred he not take the path that he has, but evolution in all things is a necessary part of this life. According to Blabbermouth, Fenn has gone on to specify singer Corey Taylor and bandleader Sean Crahan as the people who he feels are receiving undue amounts of money. Still, despite his incendiary accusations, the Pinocchio-masked musician appears to hold out hope of returning to the Slipknot fold. Check out one of our newest videos right.
And even with everything else they went through, they're still dealing with normal, typical group stuff. You know, financial issues, people feeling like this person or you not getting paid enough. That's like typical stuff. So not only were they dealing with the outlandish things that typical groups don't go through, but they were still dealing with the typical things as well. That's crazy, bro. That's crazy.
Concert tours are great. Many bands love going on tour, and their fans definitely love getting to see their favorite artists up close and personal in cities all over the world. Unfortunately, though, some tragic accidents have happened to bands on the road. On September 27, 1986, Metallica was in Sweden promoting their latest release, Master of Puppets. They were heading to their next tour date when, just before 7 a.m., their driver skidded on a patch of black ice and lost control. The tour bus flipped and threw bassist Cliff Burton through a window. What happened next is told differently by people on the scene, but they do all agree that the bus landed on top of Burton and killed the 24-year-old musician. There were questions as to whether the accident could have been prevented, but an investigation cleared the driver of any wrongdoing. In a bizarre footnote, Burton was sleeping on a top bunk when the accident happened, and he'd ended up there because of a single draw from a deck of cards. He and guitarist Kirk Hammett drew cards to see who was going to get the pick of the bunks, and Burton won with the ace of spades. He chose the bunk that Hammett had been using, and that choice ultimately led to his death.
Still miss Cliff, no doubt, and I'd love to see him again at some point.
Stevie Ray Vaughan's 136th show In Step Tour kicked off on May 4th, 1989. It ended with an epic outing featuring Eric Clapton, but that was followed by a tragic helicopter accident that took away one of music's most respected guitarists. After the show at Wisconsin's Alpine Valley Musical Theater, a group of 4 helicopters were on hand to fly the performers back to their Chicago hotel. One of the choppers had been reserved for Vaughn, his brother Jimmy, and Jimmy's wife Connie. Some of Clapton's entourage was already on board though, so Stevie asked Jimmy and Connie if he could take the last seat. It was only the next morning that reports started to go out that the chopper had never reached its destination, and when friends found Vaughn's hotel room empty, they suspected the worst. Shortly after 7 a.m., Jimmy was called and asked to identify his brother's body. Stevie Ray Vaughan, along with everyone else on the chopper, had died only half a mile into the flight when the pilot banked sharply in the fog and collided with a ski slope. Eerily, only the day before, Vaughan had shared a disturbing dream with his bandmates in which he was a witness to his own funeral. He was only 35 when he died. The end of 2000.
That sound like the Kobe incident with the fog. Sounds exactly like, I don't know, but that was the first thing that popped into my mind when they started saying the fog was the Kobe Bryant incident.
2014 was a bad time for the Celtic punk band Dropkick Murphys. On November 13th, lead singer Al Barr received word that a childhood friend had passed away. He announced to fans that he was going to be unable to make their next scheduled show in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as he would be flying out to attend his friend's funeral. But to add to the tragedy, the band never made it to the airport. Instead, they announced that they were canceling their Tulsa show after their tour bus hit and killed a pedestrian who had run into the highway in front of them. The Boston Globe later identified the man as a 23-year-old father of 1. The band expressed their condolences and requested that their fans keep the man's family in their prayers. The family returned the sentiment with sympathies to all the band members involved and to the bus driver. Black Sabbath had given Ozzy Osbourne the boot in 1979, but by the early 80s, things were sort of back on track. Part of the credit for that should go to guitarist Randy Rhoads, so it's unsurprising that the Crazy Train singer is still haunted by the bizarre accident that killed Rhoads in 1982. On March 19th, bus driver Andrew Aycock, who had an expired pilot's license, hopped in a small 1955 Beechcraft Bonanza plane with Rhoads and a woman named Rachel Youngblood. With Osbourne and the rest of his band asleep on the tour bus, Aycock buzzed the bus a few times before losing control, hitting a tree, and crashing into a house. Aycock, Rhoads, and Youngblood were all killed instantly. The incident had a lasting impact on the other band members, particularly bassist Rudy Sarzo, who parted ways with Ozzy and returned to the band Quiet Riot after the accident. Sarzo later spoke out about how difficult it was to go on stage without Rhoads. Because of that pain, he chose to leave a hugely successful band so that he could enjoy playing again. It was Ozzy's wife Sharon Osbourne who pushed the band to move on. Within a week and a half, they were back on tour with replacement guitarist Bernie Torme, but memories of Randy Rhoads continue to live on.
I think about him a lot still. I often think where he would be in the picture if he was still around. He was just a great guy.
Gary Newman, the musician best known for the 1979 new wave hit Cars, is still touring.
Oh, look at. They should have just named this deaths that happened on tour. They just said tragic accident. I guess tragic accidents should be. Okay. I was like, good gracious, death after death after death. I thought maybe a tragic accident, maybe stage injuries, or maybe some things happen in the crowds. Gosh.
And recording new music. In 2018, he announced that he was going to tour to support his 22nd album, Savage, Songs from a Broken World. That was in April, and in September, he canceled a show at the Cleveland House of Blues after his tour bus was involved in a tragic accident. The bus was making a right turn when it collided with a 91-year-old man who had been pushing a cart through a crosswalk. The man died at the scene and was given last rites by a priest from a nearby church. Newman canceled the show and issued a statement that read in part, "We are utterly devastated by the fatal accident involving our tour bus earlier today. Every one of us is filled with a sadness that made it impossible to even consider playing our show this evening, and out of respect, it would have been entirely wrong. At the moment, all we can think about are the people affected by this terrible tragedy, and to them, we send our love." Lynyrd Skynyrd's iconic 1977 album Street Survivors had hit shelves only a few days before the band members boarded their leased 30-year-old plane in spite of many misgivings. They'd already played 5 shows on the tour, and it had gone well. They had plans to upgrade their old Convair 240 to a Learjet, and their 600-mile flight from Greenville, South Carolina to Baton Rouge, Louisiana was supposed to be one of their last trips in the Convair. And it was, but not for the reasons they thought. Survivors of the accident said that nearly everyone on board had reservations about the trip. Those concerns were amplified by the fact that just a few days earlier, flames had been seen spitting from one of the engines. But lead vocalist Ronnie Van Zant was adamant that they move forward, pushing everyone with these fateful words. "Hey, if the Lord wants you to die on this plane, when it's your time, it's your time. Let's go, man. We got a gig to do." The plane ran out of fuel towards the end of the flight. The pilots attempted an emergency landing, but ended up crashing into a large tree. Van Zant, guitarist vocalist Steve Gaines, and his sister, backing vocalist Cassie Gaines, all lost their lives in the Mississippi swamps. Strangely, Van Zant had been convinced that he would die before he turned 30, and he was indeed just a few months shy of his 30th birthday when the plane went down. There's no denying that a single decision can change the course of an entire life, and for Reba McEntire, that decision happened in 1991. She and her band had finished a show in San Diego and were heading to their next gig. She decided to spend one more night along with her husband and stylist in California, while the others went on ahead in 2 separate planes. One plane arrived, but tragedy struck the other one as it carried 8 of McEntire's.
Yo, bro, y'all know this is affecting me, right, with all these planes going down, right? And Queen had been working on me for months to try to get me to get on one. In this video alone, it's done heightened my anxiety so much, bro. Just hearing plane after plane after plane going down.
Closest friends and bandmates. One of the plane's wings clipped a rock protruding from the side of Otay Mountain. No one survived the crash. Other country music superstars stepped up, even offering to give McEntire their own backing band so she could continue on and finish her tour, though she declined. She continued to memorialize the crash and remember those she lost, dedicating her next album, For My Broken Heart, to those who died in the crash. She visited the crash site on the 25th anniversary of the tragedy and posted a message on Facebook. "I feel in my heart that they They know we still miss them so much. My love and prayers to all the families and friends.
I mean, if you've got somebody you love, you better tell them, because things can happen in an instant to change your life, and do things that make you happy.
Some people are fortunate and determined enough to turn a tragedy into something good, and that's exactly what Gloria Estefan has managed to do. In 1990, she was headed for Syracuse, New York, when her tour bus was rear-ended. She broke her back and was told there was a very good chance she would never walk again, much less get on stage and dance. Years later, Estefan talked frankly about the accident on Oprah's Next Chapter.
Those things can either tear you apart.
Yeah, it tears most people apart.
It does, because it's hard to handle.
Estefan gives her husband Emilio a huge amount of credit toward aiding in her recovery, which included 9 months of therapy every day for 7 hours a day. She was up and out of bed every 45 minutes, not because her therapy called for it, but because she was in too much pain to sleep. She came to this conclusion.
And then I thought maybe this was the whole point of me becoming famous, to now go through something like this in the public eye.
Estefan has gone on to do charity work, campaigning, and fundraising, all in hopes of furthering medical research done on spinal cord injuries and paralysis. Trace Adkins was already at the CenturyTel Center in Bossier City, Louisiana in 2010 for his scheduled show when he got the news that his tour bus had been involved in a horrific accident just north of Shreveport. The bus had collided head-on with a Ford F-250 truck. 5 members of Adkins' band who were on the bus suffered only minor injuries. However, the 2 men who were in the truck were killed. According to the official investigation, the truck had been swerving as it approached the bus, and the bus driver was unable to avoid it. Ultimately, the cause of the accident was ruled to be driver fatigue. The men in the truck had been up for around 24 hours at the point of the accident and were on their way home from an all-nighter at a nearby casino. Adkins played a scaled-down version of his show following the accident and canceled his following show in Pensacola, Florida. In 2015, metalcore band The Ghost Inside were on their way from a gig in Texas to their next show in Phoenix when they were involved in a catastrophic accident. They were just outside El Paso when a truck hit their tour bus head-on. At first, details were sketchy. NME reported that the bus driver and 1 person in the other vehicle had been killed, while drummer Andrew Tkachuk had been seriously injured. In the immediate aftermath, Andrew's brother Nick said that Andrew had suffered head trauma, a shoulder injury, and broken bones. It later came out that Andrew had spent 10 days in a coma and had one of his legs amputated. It wasn't until 2018 that it was reported that it might be possible that the group would play again. Tkachuk had been fitted with a prosthetic that wasn't ideal for playing, but his father built a device that adapted his drums to his missing leg. The Ghost Inside currently have plans to play a single live show in July 2019, but what will happen after that is unclear. Check out one of our newest videos.
Wow. Bro, I didn't know that meant a lot of plane accidents, a lot of tour bus accidents, bro, happen involving pedestrians and involving band members dying and planes going down and in the fog and running out of fuel and just trying to push it to the limit sometimes, man, when we gotta slow down, man, and really be careful, you know. That's just, whew, man. Rest in peace to all those who lost their lives. It's your boy L, man. To the next reaction, I'm out. Peace. Sorry to bring the mood down. I didn't know it was gonna be this crazy, man. Y'all stay solid. Hey.